Okay, so Frank, thanks for coming out for our show.
Frank Scibelli began his restaurant career when he opened Mama Ricotta's in 1992 in Charlotte, North Carolina. After getting his MBA from Wake Forest University and spending his early years as a business consultant, his love of food pulled him down a different path. After 26 years, Mama Ricotta's is now a Charlotte staple and the flagship of FS Food Group. In 2004, Scibelli launched Cantina 1511, a Mexican concept that sold after just growing to 2 locations. 2007 launched Bad Daddy's Burger Bar, which grew to 13 locations and sold for an extraordinary amount that likely fuels future FS Food Group concepts. In 2010, Tex-Mex concept Paco's Tacos and Tequila was born, and barbecue came next in 2011 as Midwood Smokehouse, now with 5 locations. His most recent success is beloved Middle Eastern Yafo Kitchen, which opened in 2016, now expanding to 3 locations. His philosophy is simple: create restaurants that serve the food that he loves to eat, and build menus with the right culinary experts, even if it means traveling abroad to find them.
Frank, thanks for having us here today, man.
I'm happy to be here.
So this is, I'm going to see if I've got it right. You've been here, not in this location, but open for 26 years?
Yep. 1992.
Wow.
We moved here, I think it was 01 or 02. We moved from down the street. We're about 300 yards away where Maharani Indian Restaurant is. We opened up, it was 39 seats. And then a couple years later, expanded it to 75 seats and then moved here in 01 or 02.
Yeah, because when we moved to Charlotte, you had just moved here. And actually, one of your customers from the old location, as you guys were moving, was a client of my wife's where we lived. And she was like, well, your husband, because they were familiar with my restaurant where I was working, like, he should get in touch with Frank, because he's got the best Italian restaurant in Charlotte. And so once we got down here, the first time we went out for Italian, we had to leave where we were at and ended up coming here so we could get good Italian.
Hey, Carrie, can you grab me that 2-inch hotel pan over there?
Is this the type of food that you grew up eating?
Yeah, it's very, I mean, this is very much like sort of home-style Italian food, which is what I wanted to do. And I've always, that's the food I gravitate towards, is sort of a very approachable comfort food. But, you know, one of the things I saw when I moved here, and I'm sure you saw it, is there were a lot of mom and pop Italian places who made great quality food, but they were simple, they weren't real expensive. When I moved here, it was like lower end Italian that wasn't owned by Italians anyway,
right,
or fine dining, and there was no sort of in the middle, and that's part of why I opened a restaurant.
Do you think solely because you went straight for the middle, that's why you've had the success that you've had, outside of the fact that the food's good?
You know, I also think, you know, I've read over the years that like the restaurants sort of have to fit your personality. And I think there's a certain amount of like, I'm a casual, like we joke around, like I'm like jeans and polo shirts since I was in college. That's sort of what, you know, that's sort of what the reflection. I wanted casual places. I like food that's approachable. It's not as important to me to have, you know, a foam or whatever and do, you know, any sort of like that type of cooking. To me, it's like what grandmom served. It's just whether your grandma was Italian or Mexican or whatever. That's the style of food I like.
Have you ever chased down any of those food trends? Did you ever make that decision and have it like not work out?
I didn't.
We did. I would have been surprised. I
mean, I think you know, you would do some things that are like, maybe you tried a dish as a special, you know. And when I got in this business, I didn't really have a strong. I knew my mom's stuff and how to cook Italian food, but you know, as I learned how to do like braising, you know, then I would cook more braised stuff on the menu. So, but I never really chased down like trendy stuff generally.
So when you first opened up, you were doing the cooking?
I cooked a lot, yeah. So we had a husband and wife, and they said that she was a chef in Italy, and lo and behold, she wasn't a chef in Italy. And so they didn't last very long, and found a guy who had worked at Ricchio's and he was really a lifesaver. He was a great guy named George Foster. I remember when I first opened the restaurant, we used to pay on Fridays, and so we paid on Fridays, and everybody came and got their check, and no one came back, and it was me and the chef in the kitchen on a Friday night.
You know, the thing is I don't know if everybody out there recognizes like what the reality is for the restaurant industry, even before where we are now. But no restaurant worth its salt would ever pay anybody on a Friday, because 2 things happen: either they don't show up on Saturday because they're not coming back, or they don't show up because they're hungover.
Yep. Yeah, and that is exactly what happened. It was funny because Sunday, one of the dishwashers walked in who apparently thought he wasn't scheduled Friday night, and so he walked in Sunday, and we hugged him. You know, we were so happy to have a dishwasher. It was a rough weekend.
Oh man.
You know, with Frank coming into the kitchen as frequently as he does, it's helps the creative process. It's like we talk about food, we develop dishes together, we figure out together what direction we want to go in with things. And in the past, it's more from ownership. It's more directive. There's maybe less input, whereas like they have a vision and they want to execute their vision and not really incorporate you into it. You're the instrument of production, not necessarily part of the thought process. So I really appreciate with Frank and the fact that he's passionate about food. He understands how a kitchen runs.
I want to backtrack a little bit.
Yep.
So you're from Springfield, Mass?
Yep.
What's that town like?
Springfield has really declined, like a lot of northern towns, a lot of industry left.
What was the industry like?
There was
industry?
paper. There was Indian Motorcycle. Mass Mutual was there, they're still there, but I think a lot of people we've got a lot of Mass Mutual stuff here in Charlotte.
Yeah.
So
it sounds a lot like where I grew up. It was the same thing. It was like a mill town, textiles. And the reason I ask is I find that like Providence, Rhode Island kind of has a similar vibe food-wise, and they're a town that sort of grew up on the same industry. Buddy Cianci was their mayor, kind of like turned that thing around and made it more. Actually, he was before the millennials became millennials. He was already on that. But the food there that was sort of ubiquitous was the same sort of like Italian American food, but it was more than spaghetti and meatballs. And obviously that influenced where you're at now and like how your parents cook.
For sure, and then also like sort of where I worked. My first job, I worked at it was an Italian family seafood restaurant, and that's hard for people who don't experience it. But like if you were on the shoreline, you were at an Italian restaurant, you had a bunch of seafood on the menu, and so that was some of those dishes as well. So yeah, it definitely impacted my lens of how I view food.
You started as a busboy there?
It was called 100 Acres, and then they changed the names to Cherry Stones. They made it a little bit more upscale, but it was there like 50 years. They just closed it not that long ago.
Oh wow! So were the same owners, or was second generation?
Same family.
Okay,
yeah, same family.
And then so you ended up from there. You went to college at Wake Forest, right?
Went to Wake Forest.
How did you end up that's a part of the story when I was trying to
how did I end up in the South?
Yeah, I'm like, how did that go? Because at the time that you guys when you came down here, it wasn't like the mass exodus was already happening to move into the South.
Kind of a few things. I was definitely going to. I have the giant Italian family who literally would know like everything I was doing, and I wanted to do my own thing. So I wanted to go to school further away. I wanted to go in. I remember looking at University of Southern Cal, and my father's like, "You're not going to the University of Southern Cal. It's too far." So I looked at Florida, then I looked at Duke. And my college counselor said, you should look at Wake Forest, it's kind of like Duke. And so I went and looked at Wake and loved it, great school academically. And just, from the first week I was in North Carolina, I felt like I fit in, it was my place. So.
Yeah, I get that personally. We moved down here, my in-laws had come down first, and the first time I rolled into Charlotte itself, I'm like, this is exactly where I need to be. Like, it just feels right.
You laugh at like the people being so friendly, compared to the Northeast.
Oh my God, yeah.
The biggest thing to understand about Frank is he has his own way of thinking about how restaurants should operate and the financial models that restaurants should operate under. And that's for Frank to share and not for me to share. But he has very specific ways to think about how a restaurant, the margin should run on things, how labor should be run, how food costs should be run, how the overall restaurant should be run. There's very, very specific ways that he goes about it. And that was something that whenever we came together and Frank came on as an investor here at the restaurant, it was something that we were privy to and something that's made a huge impact on how we run the restaurant on a day in and day out basis. So I can just tell you, Frank's got some things that most restaurants would kill for to be able to run things this smooth.
26 years with Mama Ricotta's, and then you opened up, which was next?
So first was with Cantina. No, actually first I bought C Italian Restaurant, which was the biggest learning experience, losing my ass. I bought C Italian Restaurant. The chef had come to work for me, and
what year was this?
This was 90. So I opened in 92. It was 94.
Okay, so only a couple years in.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
so
wow.
I thought, oh, this is going to be great, and ended up really struggling with it. We converted it to Mama Ricotta's, and literally dumb luck, it started doing well as Mama Ricotta's, and then literally my general manager's best friend had a big inheritance, and they said, hey, we'd like to buy the restaurant from you, and how much would you want? And so I ended up selling it and doing okay with it, and I decided I'd focus at that time. I wanted to focus on my catering and focus on what we were doing. And so that was my first, I failed really on my second thing, and then opened Cantina. Was friendly with Dennis Thompson from him coming in the restaurant, and he would talk about what we were going to do together, and I said I'd like to do better Mexican, because at that time there was like the El Cancun and Monterey's that were not as high end, and I think I'd spent a lot of time when I was doing consulting in Dallas and Fort Worth. I had a client there, and I thought like that would do well in Charlotte, but it was a big leap because statistically Mexican food wasn't that popular in this state.
Right.
And so
yeah, definitely not like if you go to
we didn't know if it was
Texas.
a chicken or egg thing. So like it's maybe because it's not it's not great Mexican food, therefore. And so thankfully I remember my first week opening Cantina, and somebody was like really mean. She said, "This isn't going to make it." And so Cantina did really well, and fortunately I was able to sell that to Quantum Restaurants from South Africa.
You sold Cantina, the whole concept to them?
Yeah, they have a concept called Mug and Bean, which is like a Starbucks with food. More food, and they wanted a Mexican brand, and that was part of. They also wanted to have a strategy for getting visas and coming to the U.S. And so they were really nice guys. Actually, the main guy died of a heart attack. He was brilliant. And they had big plans for Cantina. But along the way, literally driving from here to Cantina on East Boulevard, I saw the building on the left that became the first Bad Daddy's, and I'm like, oh, that would be a great restaurant, and let me do burgers. And so, did the first Bad Daddy.
And so when Bad Daddy's opened up, you guys were
Big Daddy's.
It was Big
at
Daddy's.
the time,
Yeah. But that was like 2 years before like the burger thing really took off, and probably almost 4 to 5 years before it really hit Charlotte.
Right.
Because I remember burgers were going to be the next big thing right around the recession. Like people were talking about like upscale burgers was where it was going to hit, and then the recession hit.
Yeah.
And we didn't really see much going on here. It was like, most of Charlotte kind of like went, we're going to go comfort food.
Yep.
And then by the time the burger craze hit, it felt like it was about 5 years later than when he first said it was. And by that, somewhere during that, it went from Big Daddy's to Bad Daddy's, right?
Well, I learned a lot about intellectual property, which I didn't have any understanding of. And so for all the Big Daddy restaurants and bars, et cetera, the folks who own the name are actually Big Daddy's Diner in New York City. And they said, so we went and talked to those guys, and we said, hey, we'd like to buy the rights to the name in North Carolina. And they said, well, we'd like to partner with you. And they'd done some research on Dennis, and Dennis was super successful. And so we said, well, we're not going to partner with you, we're just going to change the name. And so we changed to Bad Daddy's, and literally like months went by, people didn't know we changed the name.
Yeah.
Because the logo was the same, et cetera. So we changed that, and then...
I think it had been changed for about 8 months when I realized it.
Yeah. It was either going to be initial B Daddies or Bad Daddies, and sort of, all right, we're going to do Bad Daddies.
Well, Smart kept it within 3 letters, so it was really easy. The name change was so close. That's
Right.
smart. That's really brilliant.
Well, I've been on a few trips with Frank. We go on like little barbecue trips to Kansas City or to Texas, and he's notorious. He'll order all this food and take one bite and then pass it off to you, and you feel this pressure to eat it because growing up we didn't waste food. So he'll take a bite of a taco and then hand you the rest of it. And like by the end of these trips, I feel so fat.
With Cantina, we would go to Mexico. I was always like, if I don't understand something, I'm going to go find who's the smartest in that business. So literally, we went to Mexico City and we went all over. The first trip was Oaxaca, and it was Susanna Trilling, who was actually like, she had a PBS show, and I met Susanna, friend of a friend, and went to her cooking school, and then she networked me to Patricia Quintana, who's like the Julia Child of Mexican cooking, and then through them, and we met Enrique Olvera, who's now huge.
Yeah.
And we actually had people from Enrique's restaurant came and worked at Paco's and Cantina.
Just to help you open it, or
No,
they came up
to work with us because they wanted some experience in an American kitchen. So they came for 2 weeks and then went back, and but it was a really great experience, and so did that. And then through them, I met Rob Walsh, who's a James Beard award-winning cookbook author. When we were studying Tex-Mex stuff, then Rob took us to eat barbecue because we were sick of eating Tex-Mex, and I said, wow, this Texas barbecue is really good, and that's how I ended up opening Midway.
And the sauerkraut's going on the short rib right here.
Do you find it interesting that a city in the South like Charlotte, this was my take, when I moved down here, I was expecting there to be a barbecue spot like on every corner, like getting pizza in New York. or Italian in Providence, Rhode Island. The lack of barbecue within the city limits when I got down here was horrifying. Like I thought for sure, like I was going to get fat within a week of like just gorging on it.
Barbecue's hard to do. I mean, I think, and that's what I think. Even if you're seeing in some of the, like the Lexington places, I don't think it's the same as was even when I first started going. And I think that people have memories of what it was like as a child, and they're very attached to what those memories like. But some of what's actually on the plate right now isn't necessarily always
The best. It doesn't.
what it could be. Some places are great, and some places aren't as good.
Mike, hand me a small round.
It's a hard living. It's it's definitely tough to do, and I think people weren't jumping at the time to jump into barbecue restaurants. But there are, Bill Spoone's been there forever. He does a good job. They've been there forever.
More have opened up. Obviously, you've opened up. There's a couple other spots.
Sure, Max and Tossman's. There's plenty of barbecue in Charlotte now.
Yeah. It's just not. It was just weird when I got here. I really expected to be a lot. I expected the whole city to smell like smoke.
I would agree.
I would agree. Kind of. I mean, obviously, we're a banking town more than a barbecue town, but I was just shocked that it was that.
Yeah, but it's interesting. Barbecue really crosses a lot of lines.
Yeah,
like you look at our clientele, like our guests at Central Avenue, and it is everybody, all walks of life, everybody. It's interesting. It's a Southern food, and everybody from the South eats it.
Yeah, you can't. Yeah, exactly. That's a good way of putting it. I wanted to touch base a little bit on owning a restaurant for 26 years and what that's like, because most places, if you make it so your first year you're pretty lucky to get through, but most places will get through their first year. The second and third year are the most difficult, and usually if you're going to be successful, you'll know it by the end of your third year. You should sort of feel the wheels lifting off the tarmac a little bit. When you opened Mama's in its first location, was it following that model? Did you hit it immediately?
No, we struggled. We were busy, but I really didn't do a great job of managing my business in terms of, one of the things that I've learned is it's a penny business. The margins are thin. You have to learn how to manage your margins. And I don't think people really get that you've got to watch what your food costs and understand, a lot of it's math and what's my budget and, how much can I spend this week, et cetera, et cetera. So, you get better at running your business, but I was busy, but we didn't make money. There were times I didn't cash my paycheck. A lot of those times early on, and then you get better at that and then expanding. And one of the things I understand now is I would never do a small restaurant like that again. We don't use huge restaurants. Ours are actually on the smaller side for most people, but it's so stressful. It's hard to make money at a 40-seat restaurant.
No, that's almost always the chef's dream, is to get 2 or 3 really successful places under their belt so they can do the 40-seat restaurant.
I would talk people. I get asked, about food trucks too, and I would try to talk people out of it, because essentially, I think if you're in LA and you've got, the Kogi Taco or whatever, he's got a bunch of them, right?
Yeah.
But in Charlotte, I don't know that we have that market, and I think you're basically just buying yourself a job. I don't know that you're gonna, it's hard that you're going to make a lot of money doing a food truck. I think if you're going to be in this business, you should be brick and mortar. But the other thing is, things are changing.
Do you think they're changing for the better, for the worse? Or do you think it's just changed?
I think it's just changed.
Yeah, it's interesting.
DoorDash and all that. These are they're different. It's a different thing than we had 20 years ago.
Right.
Frank has opened multi-unit brands before, and I think the best thing I learned from him is how to be patient. And it took us 2 years between number 1 and number 2, but it's going to be 3 months between number 2 and number 3. And I think what Frank brings to the table is all the experience of doing it with Bad Daddy's and Cantina and Midwood. And it allows us to do things that I've never thought I'll be able to do with the Alpha brand or at a fast-growing restaurant.
So when do you know that you've hit a slowdown time? How do you? Because it seems to me every time you'll move, you opened up Bad Daddy's, right? That happened, then you opened up Midwood, and it's all this fire goes, and you start researching for your next project. When do you feel a project is done? To the point where you've sold off Cantina?
And
not that you
I
make
sold
them
Cantina, I sold Bad Daddy's, right? And there's some element of, intellectually you're okay, it's done where I want it, I've done what I want to be, and the business is successful. I actually slightly have a different, as I get older, I have a little bit different mentality. Would I sell stuff? Yes, I would sell stuff, but I have a really good team that are partners in my stuff. And like, so I've got guys pushing me to like, let's open restaurants and let's do more things. And so we'll probably do that stuff for a while. And so.
Do you still get excited when you open a restaurant?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's one of the, I think to me, it's one of the.
It's fun.
Yeah, it's addictive.
And I like the part about, I love coming up with a new concept. I love tweaking it to make it work. I like what you have to fix and all the details that go into it. And yeah, I like it a lot.
Well, on that note, sounds to me like your dining room's filling up, and probably going to be eating a lot of penne alla vodka. Is this your most popular dish?
This is one of them. This lasagna, penne vodka chicken, and chicken carcioffi.
For lunch, what's the big? Because I can't imagine eating.
We sell a lot of entree salads too. We sell a lot of chicken sandwiches at lunch. You know, but penne alla vodkas, that's a big one.
Yeah.
You know, it changes every given day, but a day in, day out, I'd bet on that.
Yeah. Safe bet. Sweet. Well, I look forward to getting into some.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, man.
Appreciate
it was a pleasure.
it.
Yes, sir.
You too.
You don't get any.
It's a good dish.
Yeah. You know, it's held up well though, even still.
Yeah.
Now we can just pretend that we're talking. Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. This is all outro.